I want to say that traveling to space is actually possible these days. We are making this more accessible to everybody, right? Ultimately, there will be a flag placed on Mars.
There will be, yes.
Where do you want that flag to be from? Should we go back to the moon? Or should we skip the moon idea and go straight to Mars? Of course, I'm proud of being a Brazilian. I'm proud for being from a country where everybody, or I would say almost everybody, is always happy. Right?
Absolutely.
Brazilian people are welcoming people. It is something that every Brazilian has on them, which is this football spirit.
What has been your least memorable experience traveling to a country?
Ooh, that's a good one.
The Infinite Perspective Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Infinite Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Hamad Mustafa. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of hosting Francisco Augusto. He's the founder of the Wander Group, which is a travel agency, which the amazing thing is they're going to start space balloon flights from Abu Dhabi starting next year, which is absolutely mind-blowing. He holds an impressive academic record. He has a master's degree in space engineering from MIT. He has 2 bachelor's degrees separately in tourism and physical education from different institutions. He's originally from Brazil, but his visions extend all the way to space and beyond. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I have to say thank you for coffee. I appreciate that.
No problem. I really appreciate you coming on. So immediately I want to start off getting to know your early life, and eventually I want to help you. I want to have you link that to your current travel business. How did you start? And once you get to that, I would love if you would explain what a travel business is basically for a person who's a complete, who doesn't know what exactly a travel agency does, like the ins and outs, a little bit of the details and why you eventually came into doing that. So starting off with your early life.
All right. So as you said before, I'm from Brazil, from a very small town in the south of Brazil, which is about 6-7 hours away from São Paulo. If you're driving, if you catch a flight, it's going to be an hour or so. The early days for me were great, although I think we all have some challenges in the beginning of our lives, right? And for me, it wasn't any different. So my parents got divorced when I was 4, and I was kind of this back and forth, living with my dad and then with my mother, my uncle. And as a child, you don't really understand what's going on in your life, right?
Yeah.
But today I see that those moments for me were important, were great, right? Because probably if I didn't have this kind of hard time through life as a child, I wouldn't have the emotional connection I have to people nowadays, right? So today I see that as something positive, as something good. And I believe that the traveling spirit is following me since I was a child as well, probably since I was 4 or 5. Like I mentioned before, I'm from a small city in Brazil, and we're not that far from the beach. We're about 3-4 hours away if you're driving, right? And I remember, for me, the best part of the year was the end of the year, more specifically December, right? Christmas, New Year, because my family and I would go to the beach and spend about a week or so. And that was great. That was, for me, like I mentioned before, the best part of the entire year, because that was vacation. That was having a great time with my family, having some fun. And I do believe that the idea of traveling, the association in between traveling and having a good time and learning, especially, came from this early age, about 4 or 5 years old.
Okay, I see. And then more specifically, what kind of prompted you towards travel? What was, did you hear someone doing it, or did you see some success stories of people in the travel business, or was it just a raw passion that eventually turned into your full-time thing? So how did you get there exactly?
All right, great question. So for me, I believe it was all about personal experiences. I'm a traveler myself, right? So I remember back in the day having to catch a flight, like from Brazil to the United States, for instance, whether it was for work or vacation. So I do remember that. Say you have your flight canceled, right? Your flight got canceled or something has happened to you. So if you have somebody out there for you, helping you out, taking you by the hand and taking you through the steps that are necessary for you to solve that issue you got,
Right.
things are much more easy, right?
True.
So I would say that I didn't have great experiences in that sense. I was pretty much booking my flights myself and doing everything myself.
And was that because you had bad experiences with travel agencies and then you were like, I'll just do this by myself?
Absolutely. And I want to say that as a company nowadays, especially here in the UAE, we have a goal. And that's only one, which is customer experience rather than just only customer service, right?
Right.
I believe that most companies should understand this because if you have, like I mentioned before, if you have somebody helping you out through the whole process, from the very first second you buy your ticket, you book your flight, to the moment you get to your destination and you go back home, I feel like having somebody behind the scenes helping you out makes a huge difference. And that's why we are here for. That's why we are doing this, to make sure that we deliver a different kind of service.
I see.
Right. So hopefully we are going to do even better in the years coming up. And we have some ideas, some great ideas to talk about, I believe, on this podcast today as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So can you talk more about the space balloon flights that you're planning to start in Abu Dhabi?
Well, so this is something else that most people do not know, actually. But first of all, I want to say that traveling to space is actually possible these days. We are making this more accessible to everybody, right? And we do have a lot of ideas for the next 5-6 years. But for the next year, more specifically, 2025, we've got some partnerships with some European companies. I can't say much right now, but I can't emphasize enough how happy I am because this is something that is going to make space travel more accessible to everybody, and especially people here in the UAE.
I see. And I feel like the UAE specifically is one of the best places to start in Asia because you can basically sell anything interesting, anything that excites people will sell here.
Yeah,
And I think that reflects in the car industry in the UAE,
it does.
the property industry. There's innovation everywhere. So the fact that you're, I believe, one of the few players who's spearheading this says a lot. So now coming back a little bit to the travel business, for a person who has absolutely no idea how it works, what are the strengths? What are the things that are kind of difficult to deal with? How you deal with them? Can you dive a little bit into that?
Well, touching a little bit on what I've said before about delivering, not only deliver customer service, but customer experience, I think on that end, we can get a lot of ideas and insights, right? Because there are challenges, of course. Dealing with people is not as easy as it seems. However, when you understand the structure of the business, first of all, what are we actually talking about here, right? So I'm a traveler myself, like I mentioned before.
Yeah.
First of all, and this helps me out. This helps a lot, actually. So by understanding the other side, why are you booking a flight? Why do you want to go to space, for instance? I'm probably dealing with your dreams, emotions, not only your money or your budget in itself, right? It's way more than that. So I believe that understanding the other side and how people feel and what's the decision-making for people, what makes you actually go ahead and book a flight or buy something expensive when it comes to tourism or travel. I feel like we are on the way to understand as well as you can how people behave in that sense. And hopefully things are going to be even better in the next years.
Coming back to space travel, why should someone travel to space?
Ooh, That's a great question again. All right. So if I'm talking to somebody who knows nothing about space, for instance, and I'm trying to justify the reason why they should go to space, I usually skip the traditional arguments. And I don't only say that you're going to see the curvature of the Earth from up there, or the experience is going to be unbelievable. I like to go further than that, and whenever I have the chance, I like to talk about the 3 Gs. What do I mean about that? God, gold, and glory. And with God, the earlier European explorers, actually, they had kind of an obligation of spreading Christianity, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to space, especially space travel, I believe you can understand that idea as more of a culture statement, a culture possibility. So ultimately, for instance, there will be a flag placed on Mars. I'm going to say that again. Ultimately, there will be a flag placed on Mars.
There will be, yes.
Where do you want that flag to be from? Right? There are a lot of big players in this industry right now. The UAE, first of all, they are doing great in that sense. They do have missions to Mars. They are exploring more than ever at this point. The USA, of course, China, Russia, some countries in Europe, India, they all have great space programs, right? So this is the first one, right? This is God. That's an idea of culture, right? What culture do you want them to have, right? And then with glory, I like to think that the space in itself, whether you are going up there just on vacation, just for a few days, or perhaps you're going to live there, you're going to build a colony on Mars at some point, for instance. Mm-hmm. So with glory, and this idea of having something meaningful in life, right? Which leads me to the final explanation, let's say, of these 3 turning points, okay? So if you talk about gold again, for example, in space, it's known by a lot of people, a lot of scientists and astronauts, for instance, that we do have a lot of resources that we do not have here on Earth. So it's being said by people who are way smarter than I am, and people who have been studying this for much longer than I do, that the very first trillionaire will be made in space, right? So
I'm really sorry. Can I share something?
Yeah.
When I was very young, around the age of 13, 14, I researched space mining and resource extraction in detail.
Right.
And
how old were you?
I believe I was 13, 14.
All right.
So I came to the conclusion that, of course, the first trillionaire is going to be made in space. And I made it a goal that I want to be someone who does this.
Yeah.
But it's quite obvious that it's the most likely person to do that is probably going to be Elon Musk. I just thought I would put that in there because as a child, this was an ambition of mine. But please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy you said that. He's a big player, absolutely. And then we've got also, besides Elon Musk, we've got Jeff Bezos, we've got Richard Branson. And I do appreciate something that Jeff Bezos says. He does say that a lot, to be honest, which is, I'm paraphrasing right now, okay? The population down here on Earth is getting too big for the planet to sustain. So, in other words, humans have no choice but to go to space. So that's kind of deep, isn't it? That's kind of...
It is.
It makes us think about it.
He's basically imagining colonies in space itself, massive super ships in which humans can reside, with the perfect climate. Perhaps colonies like on Mars, Titan, the Saturn's moon, in the oceans of its moon. And he's mentioned that in space, because we can very much more efficiently, in the future, not right now, manage resources.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that our population might reach 1 trillion plus humans. And if we have 1 trillion humans, then imagine how many Einsteins we could have, or Elon Musks we could have, or artists, musicians, the possibility of progress. Absolutely.
Like you said, there is an ocean of possibilities, air quotes, right? So, man, it just makes me so happy. We have got a beautiful future ahead.
It is.
Great
True.
things are about to come, and hopefully our generation is going to see that.
Now, narrowing the scope a little bit to, let's say, Mars, for example.
Yeah.
You mentioned something which was absolutely true. Nations, empires traveled, migrated, and that is one of the reasons why the human species has been the alpha species throughout the planet, because of its migration and spread.
Yeah.
And as we crossed continents and countries, conquering others, there was always the idea that we are more superior than the person that we are conquering, colonizing. So, for example, in the Americas, it's always a religion or an ethnicity or a language associated with conquering a place.
Yeah.
Do you think that this would be the same case in space, that, like you mentioned, flag? Or do you think that we will see the space revolution emerge from a more global struggle, from a more collectivist struggle where all humans unite, and there's not so much a flag, but more so a united human flag
Yeah.
on Mars or on Venus, etc., in space in general?
Absolutely. Over again. That's such a great point that excites me a lot, to be honest. And I feel like if you are the first person there, let's say the UAE lands the very first human in space, and you are the first person there. If you are the first person there, you probably got leverage to dictate how that all plays out.
True.
How things are going to be, how you're going to dress up, what is going to be the food. Although Mars does not supply food just yet.
True.
We know that it does have water, frozen water, mostly in form of asteroids or ice cups. Anyway, that's such a great point. I've been thinking about that lately. And if you get the conclusion that one country at some point, not very far from now, is going to be landing a human in space, we should try to anticipate and understand how things are going to be in that sense, right? What if two nations, for instance, land humans in space at the same time or almost the same time? How is it going to be, right? How are they going to behave? Like I mentioned before, there is an ocean of possibilities. There are so many ideas that we have to think about.
True.
But first of all, we got to get there, right? So this is our challenge. This is what we've been studying about, talking about, and trying to understand more than ever, right?
No, absolutely makes sense. I believe one of the reasons why humans cannot be collectivists in terms of struggling towards a common goal in regards to space is because of the fact that the nature of the technology itself has broader implications on Earth. So, for example, if we talk about rocket technology, if we see America sharing rocket technology for the greater cause of space with, let's say, China or the Soviet Union, or Russia, my apologies, Soviet Union, then there's broader implications. So you're sharing rocket technology, but that can be applied to missiles as well. So I believe because of the fact that we still have conflicts and tensions, I truly think that although there are many unfortunate conflicts going on at the moment in the world is at its most peaceful state that it's ever been in for the entire human history at this moment. There's no great scale wars. It's at relative peace. Coming back to the fact that the question that I asked you, I do think that in some way not being collectivists in this regard is or can be a good thing, because then you have competition. One of the reasons why many people say there's conspiracy theorists who believe America did not go to the moon. But if we think about why it went to the moon, it was because that space race saying that I'm better than you between the Soviets and the Americans, that is what pushed people to be ahead of their time.
Yeah.
So I do think competition in that regard can be a good thing as well because it pushes people.
Absolutely.
Humans are, in some ways, very selfish and have egos, and sometimes that helps us propel ourselves. Sometimes in constructive ways, sometimes in not so much. Now, moving towards the tourism industry, right now it's very much space travel for research purposes, etc. How soon do you see people gaining accessible, like the common man being able to go to space?
Well, I want to believe that our generation is going to see that.
I agree.
If our generation does not see that, I want to believe that our children's generation is going to see that. And the way things are happening at this point makes me believe that we will see that, right? The way things are happening is just different than anything we have seen before. So not only exploring space is possible, but also traveling to space. And that leads me to your question, which is the idea of rockets and so many companies playing this big game right now. I usually like to highlight 3 companies that are doing great. I can't emphasize enough how SpaceX by Elon Musk is doing a great job in that sense, right?
It is.
And the reason why I say that is simply because they've got a few partnerships with NASA. And that tells a lot about their reputation and what they are actually doing in that sense. And then we've got the second one, which is Virgin Galactic by Richard Branson. They do not necessarily operate rockets. They do operate aircrafts that go into... Have you seen that before?
Yes.
That's so crazy. That's so different and peculiar. I love that idea. And then the third one, last, I want to say, but not least, we've got Blue Origin by Jeff Bezos, right? They do operate rockets themselves, which is a whole another game.
Why do you think private companies have seen more success than government organizations in regards to innovation in space technology?
For me, that's for a very simple reason. The private companies do not have the same restrictions that the public ones do have, right? What do I mean about that? Let's take NASA as an example. So as far as I remember, NASA gets about $21 billion a year from the federal budget in the United States. They do have to justify how they are actually using that money, right?
True.
And besides that, they don't have this goal that private companies have, which is making a profit, which is another type of goal. I think that explains a lot the difference in between an organization that is working through the government and an organization that's working actually through different avenues, and they have different goals. And that explains a lot why SpaceX is doing a great job in that sense right now.
Okay. Do you think AI at the moment, the way that it's accelerating industries in terms of automation, and we've seen reusable rockets use AI specifically to land.
Yeah.
What other venues do you see this contributing in terms of accelerating development in the near future in space travel?
Yeah. So when it comes to AI, I would say that it's been helping us a lot. But the most important part that I see that's actually not being, it does help us, but also it makes us see things happening differently and moving forward is the fact that AI collects data.
Yeah.
And that actually applies to every single business, right? The old man that owns a bakery down the street needs AI at some point. The guy who deals with rockets or airplanes, he also needs AI. And when it comes to space exploration, space travel, space tourism, and so on, we gotta remember that data is everything we need. And the reason why I'm saying that, what do I mean about this? If you are landing on Mars one day, this is going to be only possible because of the information we got from Mars so far, which is very nice and very important and valuable for us, right? So to answer your question, yes, I do believe that AI plays a very, very important a part on that space travel idea. But most importantly, even before we talk about space travel, space exploration, because that's all the information we got. That's pretty much through AI, right?
Right. Now, in regards to space propulsion technology, because that is the key player, that is essentially the road that leads us down to enable us to engage in space exploration and travel. Now, if I want to spend a month on Mars, and then maybe I want to take a trip around Mercury, perhaps get a little close to Jupiter, we need technology to allow that to happen. And let's be honest, our current methods in terms of propulsion make it unfeasible in terms of the time it takes to get there.
Are just not enough, right?
Are not enough. Where do you see this development going in the future? And is there any specific propulsion method that you see taking over?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. Right now, we are not thinking that far, to be honest, right? Because when it comes to space, I believe that we got to think in a way that things are going to happen slowly.
Yeah.
Right? At least for us to get there, step by step.
Step by step.
So there is a big discussion, which is, what should we do first? Should we go back to the moon? Or should we skip the moon idea and go straight to Mars? So this is a simple question. But if you don't have such answer, we cannot move forward.
True.
Right? So that actually leads me to a question for you, if you don't mind. You mentioned something earlier regarding the Americans going to the moon in '69.
Yeah.
Or not, which is a mystery for some people. What do you personally think about it?
I believe they went to the moon, of course. The only fact is that it was such an unbelievable feat that many people don't believe it.
Yeah.
Because it was unbelievable. And the simple logical reason why I believe that they went to the moon is, first of all, the evidence is more overwhelming than the counter evidence that people attempt to present. The other reason is the fact that human will, like I said, we humans have massive egos.
They surely do.
And when someone tries to trigger us, say that we're better, our brains, it's very simple. It pushes us.
When there is some sort of competition, right?
Now, I don't want to get into this example, but I'll give you this example. We look at the world wars that have happened.
Yeah.
And we've seen the technology that's come out of those wars. It was one nation showing the other one who's boss. And the only way you can do that is by being better at them. At what? Technology.
Yeah.
Better engines. Then you have better fighter jets. You have better recon. You've got better capability in terms of bombing the other countries, cities, etc. Same goes for submarines, Navy technology, guns, etc. Computers, Alan Turing. So I think human emotion, if used properly, if triggered properly, can be a major contributor in propelling development. I know that sounds bad when I just mentioned world wars, but I don't mean it in that context. What I do mean it is that if we have competition, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it can lead us to be better in areas. So I do believe that, yes, the Americans went to the moon because they wanted to show the Soviets and communists who's better.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that competition is actually healthy, as well as making mistakes. You got to make mistakes if you want to do better in life.
Absolutely.
Right? And some people say that you shouldn't compare yourself to the others. I kind of agree to some extent with that. However, if you don't see what's going on around you, how can you possibly do better yourself? It is kind of hard. if you don't have any measurement, if you don't compare yourself to anything or anybody at some point, to some extent, to some degree, it's very hard for you to move forward and do better in life, right?
True.
So I do believe that making mistakes and comparing yourself in a healthy way every now and then can be very positive.
Makes sense. Now, moving a little bit to the future of the tourism industry in general, at the moment, we don't send a lot of humans into space. It's mostly for research purposes, etc. There are certain people on Earth who are a little bit extreme in their criticism of space travel. You may have heard this before. It's a very common saying. People say, first take care of Earth, first fix all the problems here, and then go to space.
Yeah.
What would you say in response to people who say this?
Well, I usually skip the traditional arguments. If I'm trying to justify the reason why we should be exploring space, there are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of avenues you can follow or ideas we can get from this. However, I usually ask people a very simple question. How would you live your life without space-based technology, for instance, without GPS, satellites, and things in that nature, right?
True.
It is going to be kind of hard. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. That's probably why our parents did that before.
Yeah.
However, if something can make our lives easier, we
Better.
should take it.
Yeah.
We should take advantage of it, right? So we can go deeper in that. We can talk about NASA's spin-offs and the ideas that we have for the future, the intelligence that the human being can observe from ideas that are out there in space. But that's the number one question I usually ask people. How would you live your life without space-based technology?
I believe a counter that I would propose to this, the statement by certain people is, I don't think that we are contributing enough to space in terms of monetary budgets, that if we stop doing it, it's going to make much difference to everything else we're doing.
Yeah. What do you mean about we? The Earth, our planet,
our planet
itself?
Yes.
All right.
So
gotcha.
if we compare if we look at NASA's budget, if we stop funding NASA and we start fixing problems on Earth, it's not that big of a number in terms of money that it's going to make much real difference. What is going to make a massive difference is that if we take the defense budgets, we scale them down, and then we reroute them to other avenues of development, that will make a big difference because it's a lot of money.
Totally.
It's an insane amount of money.
Totally.
So going to space in itself it funnels development. You don't only get rocket technology, you don't only get innovations in rocket technology, you get innovations in communications, computer systems, AI, etc. It's very broad in terms of the reward it gives you. So the cost-benefit analysis ultimately boils it down to that there's a massive benefit versus the cost. And I personally believe that it's good to have an abundance mindset. We can go to space and we can also fix problems on Earth at the same time.
Yep.
It's not, it is rocket science, but we still can do it.
Yeah.
Now, coming back a little bit to Earth, I would love to ask you about specifically Brazil, your Brazilian culture. And we spoke before. I'm from Pakistan, South Asia, and I have a few friends who are Brazilian, and we oftentimes, when we're sitting, we're having fun, we make the comparison that we're similar. So I would love to hear more about Brazilian culture, how life is there, etc.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that I love your country. I've made a lot of friends here in the UAE who are from Pakistan, right? So they are from, correct me when I'm wrong, I think they're from Islamabad, Peshawar,
capital,
or something like that, right? And then another great cities out there. All right, to answer your question. Well, I love my country as well, of course. I'm proud of being Brazilian. I'm proud for being from a country where everybody, or I would say almost everybody, is always happy, right?
Absolutely.
Brazilian people are welcoming people. We are great people. We are
know how to
happy
be
people,
happy.
right? And this is very true. And this is coming from somebody who is from Brazil, right? However, on the other hand, there are some things that I do not appreciate, and I have to be honest with you. Long story short, I want to say that Brazil's mindset for some people, I don't want to say everybody. There is a lot of great people in Brazil.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of great friends and people that I get along with. However, the way some people think regarding their own country is just not nice to me. And that's the reason why I left. Being happy, being friendly, being warm and welcome, those things are all positive. Those things are all good. However, if you want to go further in life, if you want to do something different, you have to start questioning yourself if the place where you are is actually the right place where you want to be in the future. And if your ideas actually match with the people, the politics, and also the environment you are surrounded with. But I do love my country. I do love our food. I love the way people behave most of the time. And if you get the chance, you should go, man. You should go down there and
absolutely
take a look, because you're gonna love it.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
And that's kind of where I draw the comparison, because coming from Pakistan, I've been raised in the UAE, but I'm deeply attached to the culture and everything that goes back home. I believe we've went through some of the worst tragedies as a nation. We've suffered immensely. As a matter of fact, we've been through 6 wars, natural disasters, terrorism, corruption, massive amounts of corruption. So bad that you don't get electricity. You didn't get electricity in some parts for hours and hours on end. Can anyone in America imagine living without electricity for even like an hour?
Wow.
Can't. But we're still standing as a nation. When we actually became a country, Pakistan, neighboring nations thought that essentially it would balkanize. Basically, it would turn into many, many smaller states, because it was a very weak state initially.
Are you talking how long ago?
In the 50s.
All right.
In the 50s.
Gotcha.
So we gained independence in 1947. And there are official accounts from the leaders of neighboring nations saying that very soon this country will break into pieces, and then we'll gain control of the territory, blah, blah, blah. But many, many years later, we're still standing strong. We're a strong country, nation, very resilient is what I would like to call it, which leads me to the point that I was trying to convey, is that although we've been through all of these things, if you look at videos of tourists visiting Pakistan, and then ranking their favorite countries that they visited later on, Pakistan's usually in the top 3. Why? Because they're very hospitable people, extremely hospitable, and they're always happy. Like, you've been through terrorism, you've been through severe economic mismanagement, poverty, wars, etc. But the sense that people are still able to be happy and jolly and have fun, enjoy life, even if the roads and everything is broken.
The circumstances were not that positive.
Absolutely. But people still know how to be happy.
That's beautiful.
And I think this is where certain developed countries, certain developed societies, I would like to say, can learn from countries like ours, which are still developing nations, where people know how to be content, because it's not always about money. I've seen this to be a massive problem. The more developed the country, typically there's a correlation with the rate of the population growth going down. So in order to grow and prosper economically, you need more people. You need population growth to then contribute to economic growth. But that starts going down. So I think developing economically, you still have to think about the other things, the social aspects, developing socially as well, making sure your people are happy.
Absolutely. And that not only applies to countries, but to people as well. Regular people, just like us, for instance. The more money you got, the more responsibilities you got.
Yeah.
So the way you actually manage your wealth, the way you manage the money you got in your pocket is actually what dictates how your life is going to be.
Absolutely.
So
you gotta,
these are points that some countries are not being able to manage quite well. And hopefully you're going to see those things changing very soon.
Hopefully.
Right?
I do think we are still not at our peak in terms of civilization. You know, we've developed technologically, but there's still hidden points of development that we are still yet to identify.
Yeah.
Now, coming back a little bit, this reminded me of something. There's a part in southern Pakistan near Karachi. Karachi is our biggest city. It's basically our economic capital. So close to Karachi, there's another city called Liari. Now, Liari in the past 2 decades has suffered because of gang wars, terrorism, and it was a very unsafe place. Luckily now, the situation there is much better. So the people in Liari are obsessed with football. And whenever there's a World Cup match or whenever Brazil is playing, you'll see flags of Brazil everywhere.
Really?
People like to identify as Brazilians a little bit. And I saw an interview, it was because people said, because we feel like we face challenges similar to Brazil.
Okay.
And we feel like we look like Brazilians. And that's why temporarily during the game, people like to identify themselves as Brazil because they love Brazil so much. And because the people in that particular city are obsessed with football.
Yeah.
So that leads me on to my next question. Why is football such a big thing in Brazil?
There are a few reasons out there, right? So that's very true, first of all. I believe the reason number one is because of accessibility, right? So football courts are accessible pretty much everywhere, right? I grew up in a neighborhood, in a small neighborhood, where I did have the chance to play football every single day for as much as I possibly could. After school, of course, pretty much in the afternoon or at night. I think that's the reason number one. The reason number two, for me, is because football is such a happy sport. People should be together. People should be in a group. Before the game, during the game, and usually after the game as well, after the matches, right? So I've seen that, my peers and I, when we were younger. This was such a great thing for us to see each other, to get to know each other better. Oh, there's a new boy in the neighborhood coming over here tonight. Who is this guy? I'm going to get to know him probably through football, through soccer, and by understanding his ideas, like I said before, whether it's prior the game, over the game, or after the game, right? So it's just on us. It is something that every Brazilian has on them, which is this football spirit.
It's essentially promoting cultural cohesion in a way, because Brazil is an unbelievably diverse country as well. Similar to Pakistan, if I can share my experience, growing up here in the UAE, because it's so diverse, sometimes, even though there's a big Pakistani population here, sometimes it can be challenging to find friends with the same interest and stuff. So when I was growing up, have you seen those areas over here where there's no, like, it's just sand, it's empty? So similar to how you guys have it in Brazil with football, we used to be like 2-3 friends, and we used to play cricket together. So what would happen is, over the course of a couple of months, people our age, when we were like 14, 15, 16, people our age, maybe they're crossing the street, they see us playing, and they're like, oh, these guys are probably from Pakistan.
All right.
Should go and say hi.
Can I play as well?
Yes, exactly. So then you get one more friend, and then another one comes, and then another one comes, and now we have a group of like 20, 30 people.
All right.
And now we're all grown up. Some of us have podcasts, some of us have their own businesses, and we've grown up together. Why? Because of cricket, because of sport. If we did not have cricket, we wouldn't have even known each other.
Yeah.
So I think, again, that's amazing, because that's another way where we're similar. where sports essentially become so intertwined in your cultural fabric that
Absolutely.
it's a way for people to get to know each other and develop
Sports
relationships.
connect lives.
Absolutely.
That's very true.
True.
Yeah.
Now, you have a travel agency, but I want to get to know more about your personal travel experiences. What have been some of the most memorable travel experiences that you've had?
All right. I got that question a lot, right? That's the most popular question when it comes to my travels, and it changes all the time. First of all, I gotta be
Makes
honest
sense.
with you, right? It kind of depends on my mood. It kind of depends on the day. It depends on who I'm talking with. But my usual answer is I like to highlight 3 countries, right?
Okay.
Any guesses?
Okay, so I'm assuming one of them is in Europe for sure.
Yeah, you're right. The another one is in Asia.
Okay.
And the third one is also in Europe.
So one, I'm probably going to say Italy. That may or may not be true.
Well, so I like Italy a lot as well, but I'm talking Iceland right now.
I was going to say Iceland.
Yeah?
Yes, I was going to say Iceland as well.
All right. And the reason why I say Iceland as the very first country that I highlight is because of the way people behave.
Really?
Of course, the country in itself is beautiful, right? We've got a lot to see. It's such a great country. But the way people behave, the way people express themselves, and the way people manage a conversation, they're very polite, first of all.
Really?
Yeah. They actually listen to understand and not necessarily listen to reply. They don't just make the conversation going. They bring something to the table, right?
I'm sorry if I may, because this is very surprising to me, actually, because
Yeah.
there's a standard idea that people in Northern Europe, specifically Scandinavia and let's say Iceland,
Yeah.
are cold and very introverted, distant. They don't like talking, but that's not the experience you had.
Not at all. I mean, I've had the same idea before traveling out there. I believe I did have some resistance as well in that sense. But as soon as I started talking to them, I've seen that things are different. As long as you are nice to them, as long as you actually ask questions, if you're being polite, people are going to open up to you. That's for sure.
Amazing.
That was the very first one. That is the very first one I usually mention, right? The second one, and not less important, is Japan.
Japan. That was actually going to be my guess as well, for Asia.
right?
Yeah.
Japan is something else, man. Japan is something special, right? Again, this is my viewpoint. That's the way I see countries, through their people, through their behavior. And Japanese people are just nicer than everybody else for whatever reason. They are polite, they are cool, they are smart.
Disciplined.
Absolutely. And the food was just amazing. I just love seafood. The Japanese culture in itself is just amazing. That was my second country. And the third one, which is, again, in Europe, such a massive country. I'm talking about Russia. And the reason why I like Russia this much is because of the experiences I've had in Russia before. So this is 2018,
Okay.
FIFA World Cup, right? As a good Brazilian guy, I try to watch the matches and follow the country and follow football as much as I possibly can. So my wife and I are in Russia. So we are taking this train from St. Petersburg, which is north, I want to say,
Yeah.
to the south, which was Rostov, something like that.
Okay.
Another city in the south. And then we almost missed the train. And the train was going to take about 25 hours to get there. And the match
25 hours.
was going to start in 27 or so.
Oh my God.
That means if you've missed the train, we would miss the match in itself as well. And you have had the tickets. We have had friends waiting for us. And the fun fact is that there were journalists as well, people from the press, people from media, right? People from everywhere relying, depending on that train, to get to the match just on time.
I see.
And for whatever reason, that was crowded. There were a lot of people also waiting for that very same train. So we almost missed it. Luckily, at the end of the day, everything was all right. We've made it, but it would be super fun and kind of weird, maybe a sad story to tell if you've missed the train, but we made it, we got it, and that was such a great experience as well, being in Russia for a month or so, getting to know its people a little better, and we know that some things are not happening quite well right now, but other than that, the experiences I've had out there before were just amazing. That's why I would place Russia as my third favorite country. That's my today's answer, right? That's for today. That's for now.
It keeps on changing. It makes sense. I've had very pleasant interactions, experiences with Eastern European, specifically Slavic people.
All right.
For some reason, they have a lot of similarities in terms of their behavior with Asians. They're very welcoming, warm. Some of my closest friends are actually Eastern Europeans, Russians, for example, general people from like Serbia, Croatia, etc.
Right.
And I do feel they are closer to Asians in terms of their behavior than Western Europeans. I do see that difference. If you don't mind me asking, what has been your least memorable experience traveling to a country?
That's a good one. Well, I have had a few negative experiences in some countries, in some places. That's part of traveling.
It is.
That's just how it works.
True.
That's part of the experience. I don't like to associate bad moments or bad experiences that I've had before with the country in itself. Not necessarily, because perhaps that was just bad luck. That was just the wrong time or something that just didn't go well as planned. But I do remember that a few years ago, again, my wife and I, we were in Finland, right? Which is a great country.
I'm already shocked when you said Finland.
Why?
Because it doesn't seem like you would have any unpleasant experiences, but please go on.
I know, right? I mean, I wasn't expecting anything negative either. And that was not something necessarily negative, necessarily bad. But it made us feel uncomfortable to some extent. And the reason why I'm saying that, long story short, is because we got this Airbnb, which was a very good one, like a nice place for us to stay for a few days and enjoy the city, enjoy the surroundings as well. And for whatever reason, our host told us that we were not able to take showers after 4 p.m. for personal or private reasons. The property did have some restrictions, some things that we had to follow in order to be there for a week or so. I just wish we knew that before getting there, right? So that was kind of funny. The very first day we got there.
It's kind of odd.
I believe we got there about 7 or 7:30, and you know how things work after taking a long flight. The very first thing, we usually want to take a shower. That's the very first thing we want to do, right? When you get to the place. And we just couldn't, right? And then we've seen that the way some people, I'm not talking everybody, quite the opposite. Some people were pretty nice to us, to be honest. But this specific experience wasn't that great, and I believe I'll never forget that. Like not being able to take a shower, and then at the end of the day, we've paid for another hotel or something for a shower. Other than that, everything was great, everything was nice, but this experience in itself wasn't that great. And like I said, I think I will never forget this.
What was your favorite thing about Finland?
Again, people were very polite. People were very nice. And this is the very first approach I have whenever I get to a new country or a new city, a new place. How do they behave? How do they express themselves? How do they talk to you? Are they nice? Are they welcoming? Are they polite? And I think I've seen most people, including this guy from this experience, he was nice. He was just telling us that he couldn't provide a shower for us in the first day, but that's his thing. That was his property. So I kind of understood, to be honest. But overall, most people were very, very nice and very polite. And then, again, they listen to you. They listen to understand, not necessarily to reply only.
You know, we, in developing countries like Pakistan, India, we have an impression that we are welcoming people. We are the most welcoming. We are the most hospitable. And we have this impression that people in more developed nations are less welcoming, less hospitable. They're less family-oriented. Have you seen, because we are both from developing nations and you've traveled a lot, have you seen that to be true? Have you seen that developed countries are a little bit more cold in terms of their attitudes towards tourists versus developing nations and their people?
Well, I believe so. I feel like it kind of depends on the person. It just depends on the way, again, they behave.
The person going to the country?
Yeah, no, the person from there, the natives. I mean, the local people, to be honest, because I've seen some people being quite arrogant in terms of, why are you here? What are you doing in my country? You should go back. You're not welcome here, or something like that, right? And that was not nice. But I believe that tells me a lot about that person in specific, right? The way he or she behaves, and not necessarily the way the country is, right?
Have you been to France?
I have. How many times?
I'm just asking this out of curiosity. Has one of the people that you're saying have said, has that ever happened in France?
Not really. My personal experience in France, I've been there a few times, probably 4 or 5 times or so. For me, what I've seen is that people just don't like speaking English. Although they know how to do it at this. They know how to speak English. They just don't want to do that for whatever reason. And communication is key. We got to be able to... I don't speak French. Not fluently, at least. I've been trying my hardest lately. But this is something that in France has happened to me. The communication in itself was kind of hard because people don't want to speak English.
I believe one of my friends who moved to Canada, he's currently studying there, he said that when you go to Quebec, a lot of people know English there, but if he's from Pakistan, he's going there to study,
right?
The only languages he knows is Urdu and English. English is his second language. Yeah. So that's the only language he can speak. But even if someone knows English, they are going to still speak to you in French, and they're not going to bother switching.
There is a resistance for whatever reason, which I don't know, honestly, right? Perhaps it's just the way people want to behave. That's their language. We should learn their language for them. I think that's how they approach the situation, to be honest. Yeah.
I think I've mentioned this to you before. Because we were essentially a colony of the British Empire in South Asia, you'd be surprised if you ever visit Pakistan or India. A lot of people, regardless of their economic demographic, they are going to be able to hold a basic conversation at least in English.
Really?
Yes. You will be able to communicate to a certain extent.
Why is that?
Again, because of the fact that, so in Pakistan, one of our official languages is English.
Okay.
And that is the consequence of the British essentially ruling over South Asia for hundreds of years. So,
can a child speak English fluently? Clearly?
Not fluently. I mean, the literacy rate in terms of people knowing English is definitely going up. But it is to a certain extent where it is to a certain extent where people can understand what you are trying to say.
Okay.
And you can understand what they are trying to say as well, to a certain extent, which I would say is more comprehensive than in other nations.
I see.
And that is purely because, again, we've had British influence. A lot of words in our language are from English.
That explains a lot.
A lot of our figures of speech, idioms are from English.
Yeah.
I cannot come up with an example at the moment in my head, but like, for example, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Yeah. So we say ek tir se do shikar, which means getting 2 hunts or kills from 1 arrow. So
we've got this in Portuguese as well. Yeah.
Okay, speaking of Portuguese, what do you guys call pineapple?
Abacaxi.
Okay, that is a little bit strange.
That's pineapple.
It's pineapple because there are a lot of languages that call pineapple ananas.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, now that you said this, I'm connecting the dots
Yes.
over here. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because in Urdu it's the same, and in many other languages it's the same.
Okay.
And according to what I researched, I could be wrong, but
right.
apparently it came from Portuguese. I don't know if
Really?
that's true. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. It might be true, honestly, right? Languages are fun sometimes.
It is. I mean, man, cross-cultural influence into languages. We know for a fact that English itself has a lot of French words because the French
It does.
ruled over what is modern-day Britain.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of influence there. And I'm sure like with Portuguese and other languages, is Portuguese how different is Portuguese in Brazil versus in Portugal?
Well, great question. The language in itself is pretty much the same. Some things change, that's for sure. But we can understand each other 100%, right? Again, there are some slangs in Brazil that people in Portugal don't have. Some things that they wouldn't be able to understand. But I personally have Portuguese friends, and we get along, and we understand each other just fine. There is the accent thing, of course.
Is it different?
It is quite different, yeah. I believe the way we talk, and I've heard that from people from overseas, from other countries before, they say that we speak a little faster. We are kind of singing at the same time, so we are speaking and singing. That's what people say. I've heard this before. Portuguese people probably speak a little slower than us, but they do have a very peculiar way to express themselves as well, which I appreciate.
Awesome. I've heard that, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently there is a American English influence over Brazilian Portuguese, the way that the dialect is, versus Portugal, which has a more traditional Portuguese accent. Is that true?
Well, if I'm being honest with you, I don't know that I have a lot of knowledge on that, much to offer in that sense.
You've not really noticed.
Not really. If I'm being honest with you, not really. What I've seen before is that because Brazil was colonized by Portugal back in the day, and Portugal belongs to Europe, some people think that us in Brazil speak another languages other than Portuguese. A lot of people think we speak Spanish as well, or that Spanish is our first language, which happens not to be true, right? We speak Portuguese, and right now only Portuguese. That's the truth. Yeah.
Last time we had a discussion on this topic, you've mentioned that there was another language that I believe was more indigenous to Brazil that used to be spoken.
Yeah, that's called Tupi-Guarani. That was back in the day. It makes me sad saying that, but I believe the language is dying. I don't speak the language, first of all. I don't speak Tupi-Guarani. I think back in the day in school, when I was little, our teachers kind of taught us a few words or something like that, but that was not mandatory. And I'm not gonna lie to you, Portuguese is taking over for years and years at this point, and that's the only language we speak in Brazil. Yeah.
All right, Francisco, thank you so much for coming. We are near the 1 hour mark, so we're going to wrap this up. But before we wrap up, I'm just going to ask you a little bit more about your travel agency, what kind of services you guys provide, how's it work?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked. Actually, we do provide absolutely everything you can think of when it comes to travel, tourism. And if there is something that we don't do or we do not provide, we do have partnerships who help us out, and they kind of do that for us or through our agents, right? We are pretty much in all 7 Emirates in the UAE. We've been working with some countries in Europe as well, in Asia and in the United States. So if you might be helpful to somebody, if you can provide something that people are looking for, I would be I would be glad to help. And
Of course.
just get in touch.
Yeah, no problem.
I appreciate
I'll
that.
leave a link to your agency in the description.
Absolutely, I
All right.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching. This was such an exciting and valuable episode. I hope you guys liked it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. All right.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.